Hello and welcome. How's everyone doing tonight? Good, great. Thank you all for being here. My name's Aaliyah Pialtos, and I'm the Director of USA Gap Year Fairs and the Marketing and Outreach Manager for Dynamy Internship Year, which is a gap year program that's run USA Gap Year Fairs for the last 11 years. First, I just want to thank Brookline High School for hosting us again this year. This is one of our favorite events, and it's one of 43 stops across the US and Canada this winter. So we're really excited to be here. And I actually am proud to announce that I think this is our biggest variety of gap year programs that we'll actually have for you to visit with across the series. So there should be 57 different gap year program representatives in the cafeteria, which is amazing for all of you. And all of the program reps that are there really believe in experiential learning, and they are world travelers and musicians and artists and activists. So this is not a college fair, it's a gap year fair. And I encourage you to ask them about their experiences. A lot of them either run the programs themselves or are alumni of the programs. So they've been there, done that, and bring a wealth of knowledge to you this evening. Before we get started with our presentation, I just wanted to make a couple of quick announcements. So I hope that everyone was able to pick up a guide. If not, there are plenty of these. Take as many of them as you want. There's program information for about 60 different programs here. And then at the very back, we have some resources for you. One of them is the Gap Matcher. So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed or lost by all of the options that you have in the cafeteria, you can go to gapmatcher.com and actually take a little quiz, and based on your interests and goals for your gap year, parents, you can try this too if you want. It'll suggest a couple programs for you to visit, so that might spark some conversations during the fair. It's a really great tool to have, not only tonight, but kind of, as you're doing your research. And then this year I'm excited to announce that we have two $2,000 scholarships that we are giving to seniors who are hoping to take gap time during the next academic year. So do I have any seniors or parents of seniors in the room? Yes, okay. So this is free money for you to use to travel, to do service, internships, whatever you want to do. And tonight we actually have one of our former scholarship recipients with us, and you'll get to meet her a little later after Julia speaks. We're asking for a 500-word proposal on what you want to do during your gap time, and then a creative submission. So we want to read a poem, listen to a song you wrote, hear a video, see a video, something that reflects what your ambitions are for your gap time. The two winners of that scholarship contest will have their creative submissions adapted to be featured in our USA Gap Year Fair's swag shop. So if you're proud to take a gap year, you can actually pick up a mug, a t-shirt, a sticker, something like that. And a great day to celebrate that you're taking a gap year is Gap Decision Day, which is May 25th. So you can search hashtag Gap Decision Day if you're curious about that. So I'm going to introduce Julia Rogers. She is the founder of En route Consulting, and she works one-on-one with students to build individualized gap year plans. So not only has she taken gap time herself, she's traveled all over the world, and this is what she's been doing for the last 10 years, is working with students to figure out what they want to do and how they can do it. So Julia will talk for about 35 minutes just about the ins and outs of GAP, and then we have two gap year alumni with us. I don't know if you just want to wave or... Hello. So we have Habi, who went with CIE to the Dominican Republic. She was one of 3 USA Gap Year First Scholarship recipients, and today is actually her first day at BU. So after she speaks, I am driving her to her welcome freshman event at 8 o'clock. So she's in high demand, and I'm really excited that we got her to drop in today. And then we'll also hear from Abby, who went to Bolivia and Peru with Where There Be Dragons. She also went on Where There Be Dragons when Malia Obama went on Where There Be Dragons, was in the same group. So I'm really excited to have both of you here tonight. They're just going to talk briefly 5 minutes about their experience, and then we'll have a couple minutes for questions. You can ask our Gap Year alumni questions or Julia, and then we'll transition to the fair, which is down the long hall, follow the signs to the cafeteria, and we'll be here till 8:30, 9 o'clock. So I hope you enjoy the evening, and I'm going to pass this over to Julia.
Lost without my clicker. Hi everybody, thank you so much for coming out tonight. I love seeing all the faces in the room, and I know that you're all eager to hear a little bit more about what is this whole gap year thing, right? So as a counselor, I work with students all over the country who take gap time, but I also meet people all the time just in my regular life who are adults who took a gap year or people who are a couple years out from their gap year. And they universally tell me that it was one of the best things that they could have ever done, and it was hugely impactful for them. And so when I do talks like this, I always struggle to figure out how to take all of that positive energy and those things and that feedback I've heard from people and distill it down for everybody in the room who's in your position, which is trying to decide if this is the right move for you or for your child. So, I'm so glad we have alumni here today, and I'm also hoping to use some student voices in this talk to kind of show you a little bit about why people tend to take gap time. So first things first, I have some voices that can't be here tonight, but these are actual quotes from previous students of mine who've taken a gap year, and just a couple phrases and things that they've put in their surveys to me about why their gap year was so meaningful to them. And I think that as we hear from the alumni and as you talk to people in the room at the actual fair who've done the programs that they're representing, you'll hear similar things about why the thing that they did was so meaningful. So the other thing that I love about a gap year is that it's completely personalized. It is the most individualized form of education that you can ever imagine. Because if every person in this room took a gap year, every itinerary would look completely different. And that is really the most exciting thing for a young person, because up until you graduate high school, most of your decisions have been pretty much made for you, especially in your educational sphere. You go to high school, you graduate, and then you go on to the next thing and hurry up about it. But a gap year is really the opportunity to take a breath and to say, what do I want? Who do I want to be as an adult? What do I want out of my college experience? Or what do I want out of my educational future? So Hannah here, she took a gap year a couple years ago, and we worked together to devise a plan for her to help her develop her personal growth, because that was one of the things that she said she really wanted to get out of her gap time. And that's a really common thing that a reason why students take gap year, because they want to figure out who they are and develop who they are. And one of the things that we're finding is that 98% of students who return from their gap year say that it really helped them develop as a person. So it's, because they're doing things that are kind of pushing their comfort zone and getting them out of where they grew up, they're really growing. And then we're also, students are describing some other outcomes of their gap time that include, increased maturity, more independence, worldliness, becoming a global citizen. And these are all things that really not only help you become a better person, but they also are things that are really attractive in being an adult. You want to look for these in a friend or in a coworker. Now Travis here, he took a gap year a couple years ago, and one of the reasons why he took gap time was because he knew he wanted to study medicine, but he wasn't really sure because he had never actually been in a medical atmosphere. So we worked together to decide, okay, what are you going to do, an internship, a job shadow? And he ended up choosing to go to Cambodia for a few months and work with a dentist in Phnom Penh. And so he got to see firsthand how a different medical system works, and he actually had mentors in the dental field that brought him in, that let him observe patients, that let him assist in procedures. And he got a really great sense of that field. And it did confirm that that's what he wants to do. And he's in pre-med right now to head to medical school eventually. And what we're finding in this way is that 88% of gap year students say their gap year, aided in their employability. And some of this is because students take time to do an internship or a volunteer experience that they can put on their resume. But other times it's actually because of the soft skills that they gain on their gap year, things like better interpersonal skills or better communication skills. And these, when you're interviewing or putting your application in for a job, really set yourself away from the pack. So that's a really huge benefit when it comes to summer internships and job market when the time comes. So Mary is a different case. She, was a really high performer in high school, and she, loved school, but by the end of her senior year was feeling really burnt out from the academics, and she thought that she might need a break from the classroom. So she took a gap year, and she went to Ireland. She also traveled through Europe on her gap time, and one of the things that she came to me with a concern about at the outset of her gap year was, I'm really excited about college, but I'm worried about, taking a pause and what that will mean when I actually get to college. And one of the things that I told her, which is one of the things that researchers have found, is that gap year students actually perform better than traditional students in the classroom once they get to college. And it doesn't always help to give data points to an 18-year-old to prove a point, but it's what we have, so it's what I told her. And the reason we know this is that researchers at Middlebury and UNC Chapel Hill studied gap year students, and they found that these students, when they arrive at the classroom, they're more prepared, they're refreshed, and they're ready to learn, and so they do better academically, and the effect lasts their entire college career. So we do think it's because students who take gap time come with a little bit more knowledge about what they want to study, and they're just reinvigorated. They've taken that time to energize, and they feel ready to start college with enthusiasm. So I think that one of the most exciting things about taking a gap year is the variety of opportunities that are out there. And sometimes these come in the form of structured programming, and other times these are adventures that anyone can create if they have imagination. So I'm gonna go through a couple different categories because I feel like that helps you take this whole world, which can sometimes be overwhelming, of all the adventures one can have, and at least if you can compartmentalize them in a different category, then you can kind of understand what it's all about and what the benchmarks are of different opportunities that are out there. So one really popular type of gap year opportunity, and there's a lot of representatives of programs like these here tonight, is called service learning. And if any of you have done summer programs or traveled as a group abroad and learned through group leadership, then that's probably a service learning program. So the idea of these programs is that you're traveling with a peer group. So you have a lot of interpersonal interaction with your own people your own age, and you also have group leaders. And the leaders are experts, in the region that you're traveling in, and they're there to facilitate the group dynamic as well as the travel logistics. So programs like this are great because they provide a lot of structure and a lot of support, and they're perfect for people who either want that peer group structure or maybe who haven't traveled a lot and want to go to someplace new but don't necessarily want to worry about how to get around on their own. So Micah did one of these programs a couple years ago, and she went to Latin America, and she traveled over the course of 3 months to Costa Rica, Ecuador, and Peru. And she did a huge variety of different activities. Her group would go and live in homestays in rural villages. Then they would go off and hike in the jungle and learn about conservation projects. They hiked to Machu Picchu. They did projects on the Galapagos and learned about the amazing ecological history on the Galapagos Islands. That's where actually that turtle picture was taken. So she got to have kind of a variety of adventures over the course of 3 months, all while benefiting from traveling with the same group of people. So the other kind of cool thing about it is you get to learn a lot about the geopolitics of the region and what certain grassroots NGOs are doing to create positive change. So these are really neat programs, and they often, because they provide a lot of structure, allow someone to do more independent things as the year goes on. So a lot of times people will do this first and then go on to work abroad or intern or volunteer independently later on in their year. Micah actually went on to volunteer in Tanzania and South Africa after her Latin America semester. Speaking of which, volunteering, service, it's a wonderful way of spending gap time. And you don't have to go all the way across the world to give back. You can do it in your backyard, and I highly recommend doing it in your backyard. But you can also do it in the States, elsewhere if you want to travel away from home. So, for instance, many of you probably are familiar with AmeriCorps, which has fully funded and supported programs all over the country that usually are a little bit longer in length, but for people who are looking for an affordable opportunity, I would highly recommend looking into AmeriCorps. As well as, as we all know, 2017 was a big year for disasters in this country, and there's a lot of disaster relief organizations, Habitat for Humanity, other organizations that are working in the South and in California to address some of the recovery efforts out there. So you can spend time on your gap year actually lending a hand to our fellow neighbors in this country too. But for those of you who want to also go abroad, there are lots of opportunities to do that as well. One of the most popular ways of working with people, if you go abroad, is actually teaching English. And the great thing about that is that it's a skill that, probably everyone in this room has. And it's something that we all have to give, because you can go to a country that has requested a native English speaker, and you can work alongside the local English teacher and help the classroom kind of improve their English proficiency. And the reason why this is important is that in a lot of countries, English is the language of higher education, so it helps people improve their educational prospects. And it also helps in giving people opportunities to work in the tourism industry, which is often also has English as a requirement. So that's exactly what Sarah did. She went to Thailand for 5 months. She worked in a local school. She lived with a homestay family, and she got a well-rounded cultural experience, as well as being able to live in a different community and really experience a different pace of life and a different culture. And she really loved working with the kids. If you have a different skill set, like if you're an artist, or if you've played a sport, or if you have another skill, there's usually a volunteer program where you can leverage that skill too for a local community. So for any budding scientists or conservationists out there, there's also loads of conservation volunteering. And these are great, even if you don't want to be a scientist, but you love the outdoors. A lot of these are highly outdoor focused. So Alex here, he actually went to Peru and worked along scientists in the Peruvian rainforest at a field station that's only accessible by boat. And so he was helping scientists collect data that was then used for publication and used in studies that are directing conservation efforts in the Amazon. So these kinds of projects run all over the world, and they're great because if you're going to be a scientist of any stripe, you need to know how to collect data, how to deal with it, how to aggregate it, and these are great opportunities to have on your resume, and also to figure out if that's something that you like doing. And I should mention that there's lots of terrestrial volunteering, but there's also marine-based volunteering. So if you like to scuba dive, you can actually do your research underwater and scuba dive and survey reefs and fish populations in certain areas of the world too. So that's pretty cool. There's also lots of ways to interact with animals. So there's rehab centers, animal shelters, wildlife sanctuaries, and McKenna here is a lucky young lady who got to work with penguins in South Africa. And she was working at a seabird center that rescued seabirds, rehabilitated them, and then released them out to the wild. So, and she had lots of great things to say about penguins, but the one thing that she did say is that they are incredibly stinky. You can't even imagine how stinky they are. But, there's lots of species like penguins that are ethical and okay to interact with directly. So there's Asian elephants in Southeast Asia, where you can actually go to elephant retirement communities and help bathe the elephants, help feed them. There are some really great monkey rehabilitation centers in Africa and Latin America that you can go to. And there's other rehab and animal sanctuary centers where you might not get to interact directly with the wildlife, but you can certainly contribute to the center by being able to observe them and feed them and help care for their cages and things like that. And it's students who do this kind of thing, even if they don't have an interest in veterinary medicine, love it. But especially if you have an interest in animal science, it's a really cool opportunity. So another increasingly popular type of activity is interning. And this is increasingly popular because college is increasingly expensive, and we all kind of want a little bit more knowledge of what you might want to study in college before you get there. So I would, sometimes people think of internships as, your dad's buddy has a company and you're allowed to go work for it and you get coffee for people. And if you have meaningful contacts, I would highly recommend leveraging them, but maybe you don't. And in this case, there's actually internship programs that can help facilitate a custom placement for you based on your area of internship. So I've had students go job shadow at hospitals like Travis, go work in marketing, journalism, fashion design, all sorts of different interesting placements where you might not be able to get a placement here in the States because the market is more competitive. But in other countries, it's not as competitive, and these organizations have connections that they use for their interns. So Jack here, like many of us, has a burning passion for astrophysics, and he first interned for NASA on his gap year, and then he went on to go to Cape Town, South Africa, and intern at the observatory in the city. So he was not only observing the scientists and getting to kind of tinker with some of the telescopes and equipment, but also he was acting as a liaison for the people who visited the observatory. So this really, between the NASA internship and then this internship, he had a really well-rounded opportunity to experience different aspects of his passion. So that was really great for him, and he's now obviously confirmed that he wants to do that, and he is studying it currently. But that being said, I did have another student who did an internship in a hospital in Cape Town, and she was dead set on going to med school before her gap year. And after actually working in a hospital, she was like, I think I'm gonna go for the research. And she kept with her pre-med major, but she actually is now headed towards doing research rather than actually being a physician. So even if your internship tells you that it's not the thing you wanna do, that is just as valuable information. So just wanted to put that out there. So for some of you, you may have a hobby or an interest that you want to deepen on your gap time, or maybe something that you haven't had time to try and you want to. And for those people, taking a course of some sort on your gap year is a really great thing to do at some point. You can surf in Costa Rica, you can learn how to build a guitar in England, you can take a cooking course in Italy, you can learn how to speak Spanish in Buenos Aires, you can take ceramics classes in Colorado. I mean, the list goes on and on. There are courses for just about any possible interest you could think of, but two of them are here. Tita is a last from the right, and she's a young woman who had a real interest in fashion design, and so she wanted to kind of test that out in a course capacity. So she went to London. She did a 6-week-long course at a fashion college, and she got to do workshops with people in the fashion world, journalists and marketers and fashion designers, and she got to kind of hang out with like-minded fashionistas, which was really cool for her because she grew up in a small rural town where she didn't really have access to that kind of stuff. So that was a really great way for her to confirm that she wanted to study that in college. Whereas Meredith, she wasn't really interested in becoming an outdoor educator, but she really did want to learn more about how to camp and how to rock climb and how to do some outdoor pursuits. So she ended up doing a course in Utah where she got to do all those things. And it really, it was more of like a life skill. And I actually follow her on Instagram. And I'm always seeing her have new adventures in the outdoors with friends. And it always makes me think about how meaningful this one course was for her, because it gave her all of that skill and underpinnings of, knowledge that she can use for the rest of her life. So I would highly recommend taking a course at some time during your year if that's important to you as well. So for those of us who think working is important on your gap year, which I think is probably a lot of us, I do think that it's important to schedule in some point of your gap year for earning some money to put towards it. And sometimes a lot of people will do that during the summer before or after their gap year, but you can also do that during your year and travel, because if you are an American citizen and you're under the age of 30, you can legally work in Ireland, the UK, Australia, or New Zealand. And it's called a working holiday visa, and basically you just apply through the immigration website of the respective country, and you can go there and work for up to a year. So these countries invite people from all over the world to do this. And so there's lots of people who do it. It's a well-trodden trail, and it's really a great way to earn a little bit of money and then maybe travel or do something else afterwards. And that's exactly what Eli and Lily did. They're actually a sibling team, they're brother and sister, and they moved to New Zealand for 5 months. They worked in a cafe and in a grocery store, and they saved up their money. Then they went to Southeast Asia and traveled for a few weeks. And then they did a heritage trip together where they went to Italy, to southern Italy, where their ancestral homeland is, and got to experience that together. So it was a great opportunity for them to really help fund their year, but also while doing some really cool travel afterwards. Another type of work exchange, which some of you might be familiar with, is woofing or workaway. And this is the concept of working in exchange for your room and board. So woofing, which stands for Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms, their setup is that you can contact a host of a family farm and ask them, can I come stay on your farm? And they say yes. And then you go there and you work for 4 or 5 hours of a day, and they give you food and shelter. And it's a really symbiotic relationship because it allows people to travel affordably, but it also gives you a really cool cultural experience and a way of learning new skills. And I mean, I've done it all over the place, including New Zealand. And most recently I was in Hawaii and visited a bunch of farms there, and highly recommend working on a farm in Hawaii, because even if it's hard work, you're still in Hawaii. So, so that's another great opportunity for people who are trying to pinch their pennies. Last up is the most quintessential activity that we think of when we think of gap year, and that is simply traveling. And sometimes detractors might find this to be like a frivolous activity, but I think it's one of the most meaningful for people on their gap time. Because traveling independently without an organization is not something that most people do for their whole year, but it's something that you can work up to, or it's something that you can do in little pockets of time here and there. And it's the thing that's really going to increase your independence and increase your problem-solving skills and really help you grow as a person. So James here, he has this all beat because he started saving for his gap year when he was 15 years old. And when he came time to take his gap year, he did end up traveling for most of it. He spent the summer traveling with his family. He went on a bike tour with his grandmother in the Netherlands, and then he hiked in the Alps with his dad. And then he went on to Australia to work for a few months and save some money. And then he and I worked together to create an itinerary where he traveled through Southeast Asia for 40 days, into Nepal for a month, and then finished in Japan. And so he got to do a lot of that travel on his own because he was a pretty mature kid and he was very independent. So it's not something that anyone can do at the start of their gap year, but a lot of people will work up to it. So if you're the kind of person who wants to hike the Appalachian Trail, take a breath and build up those skills first, and then do something that's the big thing at the end of the year. So I just want to touch on a couple common concerns that parents and students have, and just to quickly address a couple of things that people might be thinking of as issues that crop up when you're planning your gap time. So for parents, affordability is huge, and thinking about, college can be overwhelming, and then adding on a gap year can sometimes be an intimidating concept. But I think that, hopefully when you see the range of opportunities out there, you can kind of see that there's literally opportunities that fit within every budget, and there's ways of cobbling together different opportunities and creative ways to make it affordable, and increasingly there's scholarships and financial aid available. So it definitely can be affordable. You just have to think about where your comfort zone is with how much you want to invest in it. Safety probably actually should have been number one on the list, but that's also something to think about, and that's something that can be addressed through, where you are all comfortable traveling as a family, and what parameters you want to put around that during the planning process, as well as the type of program that you all are considering for the student who's traveling, because more structure tends to be more safety, and if your child is a good decision maker, that will tend to keep them safer out in the field. So if you're a little worried about that, then maybe start off with more structured opportunities and move towards those independent opportunities. Sometimes I hear from parents that they're worried if their kid takes a gap year that they'll never end up at college. That's not really what we tend to see. Most people who take a gap year end up at college. In fact, we're finding 90% of students who take gap time end up at college within a year, and most of that remaining 10% ends up at college within 2 years. So, people do want to go to college, and they do show up after their gap time. For students, feeling old is what I often hear is a detracting reason why you might not want to take a gap year. All I can say to this is that I've never talked to a student who's regretted taking a gap year because because it made them start college a little bit later. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. How to choose a program. That can be a little overwhelming, but you guys are here, and that's the first step. So the other thing besides attending a gap year fair is thinking about your gap year in deliberate terms. So creating some goals for yourself, creating some maybe places in the world that you might want to visit, and kind of, crafting some parameters for your year so that it's not just the world and every possibility that's an option, but a smaller field of options so that you can kind of tailor it to whatever you want to get out of your year. And then also there's a feeling that you have to go to college. What will happen if you don't go to college? Will you just end up like on the streets or something if you don't go right there? I think that this stigma is increasingly becoming rarer because more people are taking gap time. But it's something, to be addressed, to understand that it is sometimes an issue for students, and to just know that, when you get to college, chances are now that there's going to be other people who took a gap year too who start with you. And there's even gap year clubs forming at certain colleges and universities to offer little support groups and things like that. So I wouldn't worry about that too much either. In the interest of time, I'm going to kind of peruse right through these logistics slides and get, because I want to make sure we have time for our students to chat with you too. Assuming that you are all substantially inspired by this talk and want to make this happen, if you're juniors, you can, take this all in, let it percolate. Don't worry too much now about making decisions, just research. If you're a senior, I think, and college bound, I think the best way of planning your gap year is to apply to college as you would as a traditional student, and then start planning your gap year around now. And then when you start hearing from colleges in the spring, you pick your top choice college and you ask for a deferment. So basically, that usually entails writing a letter, talking about why you're going to be an amazing student once you take a gap year, what you plan on doing, and then they rubber stamp it and say, great, we'll hold your spot until the next year. And so you put down a deposit and you're guaranteed a spot the following year. And increasingly, more and more colleges are allowing this. So you have to check with your admissions office about it, but that's the ideal. And then if not, sometimes you have to reapply during your gap year or things like that. But that's the ideal plan. As far as structure, I mentioned, thinking about why you're taking a gap year and what you want to get out of it. That's the core, of the beginning of the gap year planning process, is being deliberate about why you are taking gap time. Then also thinking about moving from those more structured programs into more independent types of programs. And that depends on where you are starting from as a person and how much you've traveled and in what capacity you've traveled. And then, also something that I see a lot is students who do multiple things over the course of your year. So don't feel like you have to just do one thing or one place. Sometimes people do something in the fall, they come home, they rest up during the holidays, and they go off and do 1, 2, or 3 more things after the new year. So keep that in mind as well. As far as budget, keep in mind that whatever the budget is for the year, whether it's just the student saving money, whether the family's putting in some money too, there's a lot of possibilities out there, and that you can also get creative in your funding. And I'm actually really excited that we have a very creative funder here. I'm gonna let her talk about how she funded her gap semester. But don't be afraid to use GoFundMe. Don't be afraid to use your own skill set to save money. I've had students who've opened up photography businesses and done headshots for seniors to save money. I had a student who knitted sweaters and scarves and made $5,000 on her Etsy shop, just knitting. So think about what skill set you have and how you can leverage that towards your gap year funding. So before I let the girls come up and talk about their gap year, I do have a little bit of show and tell, and that's because I am also a gap year alum. I took my gap year to Tanzania about 11 years ago, and it was actually after college that I took my gap year. And one of the reasons I'm so passionate about people taking gap year before college is that I wish I had done it before college. But the thing that I wanted to show you is my journal from my gap year. It's here, it's very dog-eared, it's very well loved, and it also only comes out of my fireproof safe once a year for these fairs, because it is that important to me. It's so important that it stays in my safe. And I think that is a testament to how important that experience was to me. And I think that the ladies tonight will also share how meaningful their gap year was to them too. So thank you so much for your attention. And I'm gonna turn it over. Abby, you wanna start? And then we'll, yeah? Okay, great. I'm just going to leave this resource slide up for you while we're talking. Oh, thank you.
Hi, so my name's Abby. I'm a sophomore at Brandeis University, originally from Connecticut. I actually ended up taking a gap semester. I graduated in class of 2016, and I guess my high school experience was similar to one of the examples on the slideshow, is that my high school experience was very academically competitive and rigorous, and even though I did want to go to college, I was definitely ready to have a break and have a different type of educational experience. I also did a summer program with the Experiment in International Living, which might have a table here, I'm not sure if they do, but I did a high school program with that in Spain, which kind of like developed my love for the Spanish language. So I knew I wanted a break, I knew I wanted to be somewhere Spanish speaking, and I also love to backpack, so that was kind of what started my search for programs. So I ended up doing a program with Where There Be Dragons. They offer summer and gap year programs all over the world. Mine happened to be more backpacking heavy, but I also did homestays. So yeah, I was with a group of about 12 people, and we traveled for about 3 months. We started out doing a trek north of La Paz, kind of closer to Peru. Then I went further south and did a homestay with a family for 4 weeks where I took classes. And then we actually went to Peru. We did a backpacking trip around Machu Picchu, and I ended up going to Machu Picchu as well, which was amazing. And then went back to Bolivia, did another homestay, and then we finished up in the Amazon, which was a crazy experience, really hot, lots of mosquitoes, but overall it was just incredible. And I think that gap years, it's a really good time to get a break. I think that having that kind of in-between before college is super helpful. I was definitely nervous that starting college would be really difficult because I'd had a break from doing school, but I actually found that I had a really, not an easy time, but I did really well in school, and I really loved it. And even today, almost especially today, it's pretty much a year since my gap semester, I've found that I'm relating things that I've learned all the time, whether that's in my classes or just with people I meet. It's really just expanded my worldview incredibly, and I would just, if you're thinking about it, I would say you should definitely do it. Don't be scared about how it's kind of this big idea of you're not sure how to narrow it down. If you put the time in and you use your resources, you can make a program work for yourself. You can design your own program, but I would definitely recommend it. So thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Habi Sando. I'm a freshman at Boston University. I actually just started classes today. I'm from the Bronx, New York, the South Bronx in particular. My family comes from West Africa, Burkina Faso to be exact. So my gap semester was actually pretty unexpected. So I got my college acceptance in March, or around that time. And I thought I was gonna start in September and be a normal freshman, but that didn't happen, obviously. So I got my acceptance letter, and because I was undecided about my major, I applied to a school called the College of General Studies, where I basically get my gen ed requirements up my way the first 2 years, and then move into my major the last 2 years. So the program that I was in specifically was called the Boston London program, where I do my first semester in Boston and my second semester in London. So I still have 2 semesters, like a normal freshman would, but just in a different time period. So with that being said, I was so nervous. When I got the acceptance, I accepted to go to BU, but then I was extremely nervous. I was what am I gonna do? I can't just be sitting home the next 3 months. I would cry to my mom all the time, mommy, what's gonna happen and stuff like that. And what I basically did was that I went and spoke to someone, a guidance counselor at this nonprofit organization that I'm a part of called SEO, and I was I really want to travel, but I don't know how to do it. Could you help me find some programs? And then she helped me find a program called the Council on International Exchange. It's called CIE. They offer programs in Africa, Asia, a lot in Latin America, and even some in the US. So I applied for the program automatically, and then I got like a scholarship that covered like half the cost, like so half was off already. But then even when half was off, like I still had about $5,000 more to raise. So I was extremely pissed off about that. I was like, oh my God. Yeah, I was like, I got so far, and like now just because of money, like I won't be able to do this. But then I didn't like let that hold me back. So I went back to Chelsea, and then we continued talking more about different ways that I could raise the money to pay for the trip. So I think like for a month straight, like I was on the computer like 3 hours every night, 3 to 4 hours, like just looking for different scholarships that I could apply to. And I eventually found two that I applied to. One was a USA Gap Year Fairs for $1,000, and another was a Travel Access Project scholarship that was $3,000. And then I found out, I applied and stuff. Yeah, it was very intense, and yeah, a lot of essay, like a lot of writing material, but I got it done. And then like 3 weeks after, I found out that I won the scholarship. So I was like, oh yay, like now I can do it. So that's like the scholarships. Because of the scholarships, I was able to study abroad for my gap semester. But even like after I raised that money, it still wasn't done because they didn't cover airfare costs. So what I did was that I wrote like this GoFundMe like pitch page, and then just shared it around to like a whole lot of people. And then I was able to raise about like $650 to like cover airfare costs. So I was able to get my plane ticket to go to the Dominican Republic. While I was in the Dominican Republic, I did a variety of different things. I learned Spanish. When I first got there, I spoke no Spanish. It was really horrible, but I've learned, like I was just thrown into it, so I learned Spanish. I volunteered with up to 3 different organizations, like in the city of Santiago, which is very interesting. I took different excursions around the city, and I learned to learn about like the different places that are in Santiago in the Dominican Republic, and the different type of people that live in the different communities. And I also learned a lot about Dominican-Haitian relations. One of the best organizations that I volunteered with was called Acción Callejera, which means street action, and we basically work with Haitian migrants who live and like work on the streets. Many of them work as limpiabotas, which means shoe cleaners in Spanish. A lot of them like migrated from Haiti to live and work in the Dominican Republic. There are boys from like age 12 to 17 who are here alone working to like raise money to put back to their families. A lot of them like put their lives on hold. And I never knew that this young population of boys existed until I visited. So that was an amazing experience overall. I got to learn Haitian Creole. I got to learn about their culture, their dance. And then I also I need to talk about that more. Yeah, that was just a very amazing experience, and I'm actually planning to go back to the DR in May to do like some fundraising efforts and like meet back with the boys that I met over there, because they changed my life forever. They were just extremely amazing people. And then I got to live with the host family, which was pretty interesting. I like ate traditional Dominican dishes. What else did I do? I learned Spanish. They spoke Spanish in the house. I watched telenovelas. It was the house. Yeah, the house is really safe. So like, if you guys are worried about safety, like that shouldn't be a concern if you're going with the structured program. I was also the only gap semester student, and I had like a lot of college students there with me. So I had people to like guide me and tell me, oh, when you get into college, you should do this, and when you get into college, like don't do that. So like they helped me prepared for my experience, so that when I got back, I wasn't so nervous. For anyone thinking about taking a gap semester, I think that you should definitely do it. Like, you will come out an extremely changed person. Before my gap semester, like I would not have been able to come up here and do this like at all, because I was so shy and like just scared to like have my opinion or like my voice is heard. But in the Dominican Republic, I was constantly like thrown into awkward like situations that I was forced to get out of my comfort zone. Like they would force me to dance all the time, and I don't know how to dance at all. So just different situations like that, and just being like thrown into like a group of like new people and being the only new one, like take you out your comfort zone and make you realize that you need to use your voice a little bit more and speak up a little bit louder. You don't need to be scared for everything, because like that is not that scary all the time. And then now like even like I've noticed like a change in myself. Like when I'm here, like I can talk to like random people on the streets and be like, oh hey, or like practice my Spanish or like practice my Creole with people. But like it's been much easier making friends at BU like since I started, because like all that shyness that was in me before the Dominican Republic kind of like was taken away through all the experiences I had over there. So if you're thinking about taking a gap semester, you should definitely do it. And also another tip that I have is that there's always money out there. There's always free money. What you have to do is like you just have to search for it. Like I did, like just keep searching and speaking to people because a lot of people don't know what a gap semester is. So if you go by like talking to people about your experiences, like people will definitely help you find scholarships. There's a lot of money out there. You just gotta look for it. So yeah, I'm done.
I just want to keep to time because I want to respect your time as well. Does anyone have any burning questions for the audience or for our panelists? Julia, Abby, they will also be around.
Yeah, I'll have a table in the cafeteria, so if you have questions, please come say hello. You can take a brochure on your way out, and so maybe direct anything towards the ladies if you
Do we have any questions for Lee? Sure.
What's it like doing a semester rather than a year? Wait, Abby.
And if you do want to go to the cafeteria, maybe you could sneak out the back.
Okay, should we say that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I'm just curious to know, like, I was talking about that this evening, and I sort of said maybe better to do a whole year and then start writing questions.
Well, I chose to do a gap semester mainly because of Brandeis, so I was accepted as a year student. So I had an option to defer, but I could only defer another year, which would make me be doing an 18-month gap year. I'd always kind of wanted to do a full year, but I actually really liked having this semester because it seemed like a smaller chunk of time, so I was really accommodated out more. And I also ended up being able to do something in the summer before my semester, so I actually worked in California the summer before as well. So it was a nicer amount of time, it was less intimidating, and I was also with another group of peers, there were about 100 of us at Brandeis, so I kind of put this like experience with other leadership in college.
I was like kind of the same thing in my January program, and I think the huge difference in like taking a gap year like for a whole year and like a semester, with the semester you're just constantly like getting back like into the nitty gritty of things, so like you're constantly like preparing yourself, like that you know that you have something waiting for you, if that makes sense. So like I did that semester off, and like I knew that when I came back it was going to be time for me to like get on my grind as soon as possible because I needed to start college. And I also feel like that a semester off only is less intimidating like than a full year, like if you're afraid that you won't like be as strong enough to start school.
Any other questions for me or Abby?
Give it up for them. Yeah.